Good morning. I'm going to light our Hanukkah menorah, brand new to the church. It's beautiful. And before I do, I will just give an English translation of the prayers. Typically, we would sing all three prayers only on the first night, but in our family, we like to sing all three of them every night. So that's what I'm going to do this morning. The translations are as follows. The first prayer is, "Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has hallowed us with the mitzvot, commanding us to kindle the Hanukkah lights." The second one, "Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who performed wondrous deeds for our ancestors in days of old at this season." And then the third prayer, which I love especially, which is often sung at the beginning of many Jewish holidays, "Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has kept us alive, sustained us, and brought us to this season." Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asa nisi lavoseinu, bayamim hohem, ba'azman hazeh. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehekianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Amen.
This is titled The Leper Messiah at the Gates of Rome, from the Babylonian Talmud Sanhedrin. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi met Elijah while the prophet was standing at the entrance to the cave of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Rabbi Yehoshua asked him, "Do I have a place in the world to come?" Elijah replied, "If the master desires it." As Elijah spoke, Rabbi Yehoshua looked about in wonderment. Perhaps it was only the echo from the cave before which he stood. But later on, when he would speak of this meeting with Elijah, he would say, "I saw two of us, but I heard the voice of a third." Rabbi Yehoshua asked Elijah another question about the future time. "When will the Messiah come?" Elijah answered, "Go and ask him himself." Rabbi Yehoshua was amazed. "You mean I could find him? Talk to him? Now? Where is he?" Elijah said, "You can find him at the gates of Rome." "How will I recognize him at the gates of Rome?" asked Rabbi Yehoshua. Elijah told him, "There he sits among the lepers, whom you will find unwinding all of their bandages at the same time, and then covering their sores with clean bandages. The Messiah is the only one who unwinds and rewinds his bandages one at a time, thinking, 'I want to be ready at a moment's notice if I am called.'" Rabbi Yehoshua traveled from the cave of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai all the way to Rome, a journey that seemed to take him only a few steps. He was not frightened by the strong gates of the enemy, nor the pitiful condition of the lepers. Keeping in mind Elijah's advice of how to identify the Messiah in the most unlikely of places amongst the most wretched of people, he quickly spotted the one poor sufferer who was unwrapping and rewrapping only one sore at a time. Rabbi Yehoshua approached him and said, "Peace be upon you, my master and teacher." The leper looked knowingly at him and replied, "Peace be upon you, son of Levi." Rabbi Yehoshua asked him, "When will the master come?" "Today," said the leper. Rabbi Yehoshua returned to Elijah in the blink of an eye. Elijah said to him, "What did the Messiah say to you?" Rabbi Yehoshua replied, "He said, 'Peace be upon you, son of Levi.'" Elijah said, "Ah, as to your first question of me, he assured you that both you and your father have a place in the world to come." Rabbi Yehoshua said, "But he lied to me, saying, 'Today I will come,' but he has not come." Elijah said, "No, he did not say that he would come today. Rather, he was quoting Psalm 95, verse 7 to you. Today, if only you will listen to God's voice. And so ends this reading.
Well, this morning I'd like to begin with a story. This story is entitled The Squire, and it was written by Isaac Bashevis Singer. Isaac won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1978, and this is a somewhat abridged version. The Squire. 5 Hanukkah lights burned in the Hanukkah lamp in the Trisker Hasidic study house, as well as the large candle called the Beetle. In the oven, potatoes were roasting, and their smell tickled everyone's nostrils. Old Reb Barish sneezed, and the boys around him wished him good health. Then old Reb Barish said to the boys, "Let me tell you a story of a man named Phalak, a scholar of the Talmud. His wife was named Sarah. Together, they ran a dry goods store and were quite content. But then their luck changed. First, their store burned down. Then Sarah became ill. There was no doctor or druggist in Valgaray where they lived. Only home remedies like leeches, cups, and bleeding. Finally, Sarah died, leaving 3 children, Manis, Pesel, and Etel. Well, not long after Sarah's death, Phalak himself became mortally sick. Then it happened. It happened on the first night of Hanukkah. As always, there was a great deal of snow, frost, and blizzard. Things had reached such a state in Phalak's house that finally there was not even a loaf of bread. There were a few pennies left in the house, but instead of buying bread, Manis, the son, bought oil and wicks for the Hanukkah light. He hummed Rock of Ages, the very hymn we just sang, and kissed his children. The children sat at the table hungry, without having eaten their supper. It was cold in the house. Suddenly, someone knocked at the door. Probably someone with a gift, Manis thought. See, his father had warned him against ever accepting any gifts. Over and over, his father would tell him, don't accept any gifts. We're fine. But the knocking at the door did not stop. After a while, Manis went to the door, ready to say, Father told me not to accept anything. But when he opened the door, he saw a squire, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a long fur coat with tails down to his ankles and a fur hat sprinkled with snow. Well, the squire said, I passed by on my sleigh and I saw a little light in a lamp, the likes of which I have never seen before in my life. So beautifully made. Why did you kindle only one light if there are 8 holders? Is this some sort of Jewish holiday? And where, perchance, are your parents? Well, Manis knew Polish and how to speak to an important man. He said, Come in, Your Excellency. It is for us a great honor. Well, once in their living room, the squire stared at that Hanukkah lamp. The squire asked about the lamp, and Manis told him the story of Hanukkah, how the Jews fought the Greeks in ancient times in the land of Israel. He told him about the miracle of the oil in the temple. There was barely enough oil left to light the menorah for even one day, but a miracle happened, and the oil was sufficient for 8 days. Well, then the squire, as he was looking around the living room, he inquired about the dreidel on the table. So Manis explained the game, and they played together, even though Manis had no money with which to play. Well, as they played, Manis said, Your Excellency, my father is quite sick. We have no mother, and we don't even have a penny to our name. Well, the squire said, I intend, if you want to know the truth, to offer you 1,000 gullens for your magnificent lamp. But I don't have the whole sum with me. So I will give you 500 gulden in advance, and with this money, you can play. You can play dreidel with me. Well, he took a large bag of gold coins and he threw them on the table. The children were so astounded that they forgot that they were hungry. And in 1 hour, the squire had lost all of his gold, and the children won every coin. The squire said, Well, lost is lost. My driver and my horses outside must be cold, so good night to you, and happy Hanukkah. And don't worry about your father. With God's help, he will soon recover. Well, the girls burst out crying. I mean, not only had they gotten 500 gulden as an advance on the lamp, but the squire lost additional money, so the lamp was still theirs. Manis ran outside to see if that squire and the sleigh, the horses and the driver were still there. But they had all vanished without leaving any tracks on the snow. Usually horses harnessed to a sleigh have bells around their necks. and no one can hear the jingling. The sleigh was far away. The night was quiet. Well, the moment the squire left, Phallic, the father, opened his eyes in bed. See, he had gone to sleep near death, and now he woke a healthy man. Nothing but a miracle could have saved him. And so the miracle occurred. Well, the boys who were listening to old Reb Barish tell this story, they asked, so who was that squire? Was it the prophet Elijah? Who knows? He certainly was not a Polish squire. Did he ever come back to get that lamp? Not as long as I was in Belgorod, the old man replied. If he had been the prophet Elijah, he would have kept his promise, one of the boys remarked. Well, old Reb Barish didn't answer immediately. He pulled on his beard and he wondered, and he finally said, well, they have a lot of time in heaven. The end. It's a pretty good story, isn't it? I mean, perhaps some of you have heard that one before, but for me, it was the first time I had heard it this past week. You know, when I first read this story from a collection of Hanukkah stories that my mother gave me, and I was actually brought to tears. You know, I'm not sure that was the intention of the story or the author, for at its core, it's a story of overcoming hardship, of welcoming the beloved stranger into your home, of generosity to the less fortunate, to the divine mystery and wonder of miracles. You know, all I could think about was that old dying father who was too proud to accept help, who wanted so badly to provide for his children, who had lost his health, his wife, his pride, and soon his life. The story reminded me of my mom. It reminded me of something that is still almost too tender to speak aloud. My mom is dying. For those who may not know yet, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer in 2017. She received this diagnosis. It was beyond scary. At that time, we didn't know if she only had months to live. But here we are, over 3 years later, and she's still with us. You know, in fact, my family will be seeing her later this afternoon to help celebrate her 77th birthday. Well, much like Phallic, the father in the story of the squire, she has suffered greatly over these past 3 years. She's endured years of daily targeted therapy that brought rashes and sores all over her body. It made her fingernails fall out. She lost weight and strength and mobility. More recently, she has undergone chemotherapy every 3 weeks, something that I know several of you here today are familiar with. The steroids she has to take prior to chemotherapy prevent her from sleeping. The side effects from the chemo have left her drained, without an appetite, nauseous. It's made her hair fall out. And now, as the cancer has spread to much of her right lung, the pleura, and her lymph nodes, she's having trouble walking from room to room because it's hard to breathe. Now, and perhaps the most profound impact on someone who has been a preacher for much of her life, she's lost her voice, leaving only a hoarse whisper where there was once a strong, thoughtful voice, a voice that for decades made people sit up and listen. So, you know, when I read today's story about the dying father, Phallic, it reminded me quite frankly, my mom. And honestly, I was a little annoyed at the ending. I mean, with Elijah or some other magical divine being coming and saving the day. Poof, your dad is cured. You're rich. All is made right and fair. Happy days are here again. As we all know, this is not how the story will end in real life for any of us. We will all watch our loved ones die. Someday, each of us will die. And this winter, during this pandemic that is taking so many of us all at once, a time when they say each and every day we are losing more lives than we did on 9/11. I'm not sure stories of everything turning out okay is really what we need to hear. But yet, this time of year when family traditions abound, when lights are lit, memories of long past are remembered, when that latke that grandma made brings us back to her warm kitchen so long ago, when dreidels are spun and our minds bring us back to that time when our sister wouldn't stop teasing us because she won all the gold coins. These memories are what help us return to hope. So we keep our family traditions alive, now more than ever. I've noticed that driving around, I see more lights, it seems, this year than in years past. For during these moments of fear and worry and isolation, we need to hold on to these rituals that ground us. They give us comfort. They remind us of our long departed loved ones, those who we miss so dearly. And perhaps it might be helpful to remember that our ancestors have been here before. They have endured hardships. They have lived through famine, flood, war, and yes, plagues. But their plagues did not have a vaccine after 11 months. And for that, we are so grateful. So we hold on to these things that root us to the past, whether for you that means stringing up the lights, hanging the boughs of holly, or lighting the candle each night for 8 nights. But this year we do so with bittersweet joy and tender sadness. For as Becca earlier sang in the Hanukkah blessing this morning, singing a prayer that perhaps might not align with our own UU theology, but nonetheless speaks to the depths of our soul with echoes from our ancestors. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has granted us life, sustained us, and enabled us to reach this occasion. Perhaps in a slightly UU bent on that phrase, we sing to that divine mystery that has given us life, breath, and allowed us to be here today, now, together in this moment of connection and love. There's a tradition during Passover where at the Seder table, we are to leave an empty seat and a cup of wine for the prophet Elijah in hopes that he may visit, as he did this morning in the story of the squire, or when he went in search of the Messiah in the form of a poor leper in the story that Marshall shared with us from the Babylonian Talmud. I fondly remember this past spring when we were at First Parish, and we had our annual Seder, this year for the first time over Zoom because of course, COVID. And this is a tradition that was helped to come into life here at First Parish, largely due to our beloved former beloved member Dan Bible. Sadly, he did pass this past year, and we still miss him so dearly. Now, I remember the bittersweet joy this tradition brought to those around the table. I remember partaking in this time-honored ritual. It's not part of my family tradition, but in my experience that evening, it was grounded in the sacred, and perhaps even a mystical experience happened for us that night. It was as if we were calling up the names of all who came before, and they were right with us there, somehow. And I wonder, this coming spring, this Passover, this Easter, how many of us will be missing at our tables? How many will we have lost? You know, no matter what, we will leave an empty seat and a cup of wine at that table. Because who knows? Miracles do happen. So may it be. Amen. Now please join us in our closing hymn, Light One Candle.